You can see where the moon is. Tomorrow's the full moon. Isn't that cool? Wow. And we got snow again last night. Messy. I'm probably going to be stringing together a few videos of them. Lemon. Now I've got to jump over these things. How's the snowman? He's getting smaller. Oh, I'm getting inside.
It's clouded.
I see him coming. Phew, that stinks. We're waiting on the bus. Waiting for the bus. It's Wednesday. Everybody must be getting paid today or something. Tons of traffic. Polizia. No, the police car. This is the most traffic we've seen in the morning. What is it with Wednesdays around here?
Yeah, I got the picture of me.
You got to check into that.
I guess you're on this spot.
Hubby's got to go check for that. Look at the sparkle. Sparkle, sparkle. See, that's when it looks nice. When it gets like this, yuck. But that looks nice. Oh, sparkly. Sparkle, sparkle, sparkle. Oops. A lot of people still have their lights up and on. Cool. Hello, my friends, and welcome. This is White Witch 110. I've got a story for you. It is called Inside the Pit. And it's the second part of the one that I've just finished reading, The Quarry. So let's get on with it. From within the depths of the black hole, voices can be heard. If you listen close enough, it had been a year since the quarry caved in. The four friends often thought back to that day. I want to visit the quarry, Laurie announced to Paul. Why? He asked. It's been a year. I'd like to see how much it's changed, she said honestly. I'll call Joe and Dina, see if they'd like to come. As the four approached the quarry in silence, visions of that evening stayed forward in their minds. They joined hands as they stood at the fence. The bushes were taller, the hole seemed darker, if that's at all possible. You can feel cold air rushing up to you. Can you feel it? Dina asked. The three agreed they could. I'd love to see what's at the bottom, Paul commented. That will never happen, my friend, Joe said. It would be a way to bring money to the small town, to the small city, Paul continued. As they stood gazing in, Laurie heard something. Shh. Laurie leaned forward as far as she could. Do you hear that? The three strained to listen. Voices, can't you hear it? She asked, frustrated. I think all you're hearing is the wind from down below. Don't forget, our minds try and make sense of normal sounds. Maybe you hear voices because you want to, Joe added. I'm not hearing things, Laurie insisted. You hear it, don't you, Dina? Dina tilted her head. I hear something, but I can't say it's voices for sure. Laurie felt defeated. Well, I know what I heard, even if you don't. She broke away from the others. Alone, she whispered, I hear you, even if they don't. I know you're still working away. A tear fell slowly from her eye. Paul joined her. It's not that we don't believe, it's just... You've seen the miner leave. That doesn't mean the others aren't here. Don't you feel that? There's something in the air. Laurie took a deep breath. Paul said not a word. He only held her in his arms. Joe walked the fence, snapping photos. Paul joined him. Dina took the opportunity to speak with Laurie. I think I heard voices, but I can't be sure. She smiled faintly. The women joined the men. I suppose this fence is a permanent thing, Joe said, touching the steel. I've seen them, Laurie said to Dina. What were they doing? She asked. They were just there. We were there too, just standing. When did this start? The past week it started. Laurie turned to Dina. I seen them here, hands reaching from the pit. That's a nightmare. Dina didn't want to hear any more. Although she said nothing to Laurie, she had been dreaming of the quarry as well. They didn't stay very long. The women felt a tug of emotion as they walked away. That night, the miners came into her dream. She and Dina were standing on the edge. Gray hands reached up, straining for help. She could hear the screams. Try as they might, neither of them could grab hold. The sound was deafening. The agony in their tone became too much for Laurie. She sat straight up in bed with Paul holding her arms. Laurie, wake up, he shouted over and over. She shook her head, then began to cry. They're down there, Paul. All the miners, they're still down there. Their bodies were never retrieved. And how do you know that? He asked. My dream. Paul, their hands were reaching to be saved. There must have been 20, but it seemed like 1,000. All gray and white from ash. It was horrible. Unbeknownst to them, across the street, Dina had the same dream. I'm sure their bodies are still there, Dina insisted. We have to get them out. Babe, I don't think the city's going to listen to us. They'll say it's just a dream, Joe told her. Dina turned to leave the room. Where are you going? Downstairs to call Laurie. She'll understand. It's 4 a.m. She's likely sleeping. I highly doubt it. With that, Joe heard her march downstairs. She made herself comfortable on the sofa, dialing Laurie's number. Hello? Laurie, I had a dream. Laurie cut her off. The hands? Yes. It was horrible, wasn't it? Yes, it was. I believe their bodies are still there, Dina told her. I agree. We need to get to the quarry, Laurie said. The guys were against the idea. They were admitted. What? Hang on, hubby's music is distracting me. Okay. They were adamant that none of them were going back. The following day, the women went. The sky seemed darker above the pit. The smell of damp hung heavy in the air. The temperature around the hole was 10 degrees cooler. Voices began to rise from the depth of the lost mine. The agony was clear. They had to find those bodies and give them rest. "How are we going to do this?" Dina asked. "We need to get down there and search." "Shouldn't we leave this to experts?" Dina said out loud. "They won't do anything. You know that as well as I do. We need proof." There was no other way. They would have to come back another day. The dreams continued, the same one every night. The women were there in the mine alongside the men. They watched them working. They heard the knocks and listened to the miners acknowledge the sound, but they continued to work. They seen the brilliant light of a blast, the rumbling as the ceiling and walls gave in. Lori and Dina heard the screams. They heard the voices shouting for help fade away. They would wake in a sweat, uncomfortably crying. Paul and Joe realized this couldn't go on. They contacted a person from the city and explained they believed the bodies of the miners were still there. "We know they are. There was no way at the time to get them out. The entire tunnel system was much too unstable. There was only one body recovered, and he was laid to rest at the cemetery on the outskirts of the city. There was no sense in pushing the issue." Paul informed Lori of the information. "His name was Bob Smith, right?" "Yes, how did you know?" Paul asked. "He came to us last night. He's the one we all seen at the quarry. He tried to get help, but it was too late. He said they should have heeded the Tommyknocker's warning. That was their mistake. The city will not retrieve the bodies. They're going to erect a plaque on their behalf, a tribute to the men that died. Their families had no closure. This isn't fair." Lori was upset. "Hey, calm down. I'm not the one who said, remember that. Don't shoot the messenger." She apologized for letting her emotions reflect on him. "I'm sorry," she sighed with frustration. The longer they waited for minds to change, at City Hall, more details were brought to light. The miners were all related either by birth or marriage. Only one man was not, and that was Smith. The surname of the others was Ryan. They were brothers and cousins, brothers-in-law by various last names. It was a terrible string of events that left everyone devastated. It was many years before the small city returned to some normalcy. The families gathered at the site on the anniversary for a decade. The Ryan families eventually moved away with every generation. It was sad to realize no one went anymore to pay their respect. It was as if the entire incident was forgotten. It made sense that they would want to be found, be remembered, but it always came back to how. "Dina, we have to find a way. We'll never get any rest unless we do. It has to be us. We have to go down and find out what we can," Dina told Lori. "I know the implications of crossing that line to get down there." The women had rock climbed in the past, but they were nervous regarding the tunnel. With their minds made up, they called it a night. Their dreams were like a map as to where to look. They were also reminded to listen for the Tommyknocker. It was early on Sunday when they lowered themselves into the pit. The temperature change was still a shock. Upon reaching the bottom, they turned their flashlights on. They looked up to where they had rappelled from. The light was now like a pinpoint from their vantage point. It was cold and damp. They could hear water dripping somewhere in the tunnel. "Are we ready for this?" Dina asked. Ready as I'll ever be. How about you? Yep. I'd say we go from our dream to find them. Laurie agreed. In the dream, they are at the exact spot they are now. To the right was a wall, so they moved to the left. The way was not too clear, of course. They had stones and piles of earth to climb over and maneuver around. In the dream, they went left again, another wall. It was at this point that they had to dig with their hands to uncover a shovel. Do you think the rescuers left this behind? Dina inquired. Maybe. This part makes me nervous. What would stop another collapse? We didn't see one in the dream. Dina was right. They took turns shoveling until a blast of cold air hit them. They stopped and looked at each other. A few more piles of dirt, and they were through. Laurie shone her light. Just as in the dream, they could see helmets. As they crawled through, they realized what else they would see. Oh my goodness, Dina said in a whisper. She could not control her tears. Laurie was sitting on the ground behind her with her face in her hands. This isn't how it looked in the dream, Dina said. Because it was their spirits waiting. There were bones inside material. Some had helmets on, others beside them. They were so close to them, Laurie noted. But remember, they had to pull out. So maybe these are the rescuers. What do we do? Dina worried. They thought back to the dream. The women could see themselves. They paused, said a prayer, and moved on. Through a literal hole in the wall, they found the miners. They collected ID from each of the 10. Laurie shook her head. There should be 20. Over here, Dina shouted. By the wall were the other 10. The women took time to pray once again. It was at this moment they heard a knock. It was the warning. Quick, let's go. They said to listen for the Tommyknocker. We have to go now. Laurie was in a panic. They scrambled to the wall and crawled through. Do we have all the wallets? Dina asked. Laurie quickly counted. Yes, 20. They continued on, stopping to grab ID from the other bodies. Behind them, they could hear the earth caving in. Back to the open pit, they hooked themselves up and climbed back out. Paul and Joe were waiting for them. Are you two crazy? Do you have any idea the trouble you'd be in? Paul was furious. We're fine, Laurie said calmly. Help us get out of this harness. Back at the car, they explained themselves. We couldn't ignore the dream. We knew everything would be fine, Laurie continued. They showed us where to go. Did you find them? Joe asked. Yes, Dina jumped in. Exactly where they showed us. We took their wallets, all 20, plus the rescuers. And what are you going to do with the wallets? Paul wanted to know. Take them to the police, Laurie answered. Don't worry, we'll leave them in an envelope. What are you hoping they'll do? Joe asked. That they return them to the family that is still here? Have you looked inside them? Paul asked. No, we never thought to, Laurie admitted. Paul opened the first wallet. There's a note. He read it aloud. Dear Jan, I know now we won't make it out. Remember, I love you always. Joe read the next. Betty, you have always meant the world to me. No, I'll be with you in spirit. Dina pulled out one next. Dorothy, I won't be home for Christmas. Tell the kids I love them. Love you. Laurie couldn't bring herself to read one. She felt it was an intrusion of privacy. All the notes were addressed to women except one. Dad, I took your advice. I bought Nancy a ring. You'll find it in my sock drawer. Please make sure she gets it. Love you all so much. Goodbye. The last note was heartbreaking. This young man was only 20. They carefully placed each note back as they read it into the wallets. One last prayer was said for these courageous men. There were no notes found in the rescuers. They didn't have a chance, Dina cried. Joe took it upon himself to take the envelope to the station. I found this by the pit. I'm guessing someone intended to steal these, he explained. The officer behind the counter slowly opened it and poured the contents out on his desk. He opened the first wallet. His hand touched. He read the note to himself. These are from the miners. Where did you say you found this? By the fence. Is this the only thing there? Yes. I took a quick look and brought it straight here, Joe told him. You know there are cameras all around the pit. Yes, sir, I'm well aware of that. Joe was sure nothing would turn up, and indeed nothing did. The wallets that could be returned were. Others were placed in a museum, displaying the notes and articles on the tragedy. The bodies of the rescuers were laid to rest. The following year, all 20 remains of the miners were brought to the surface and buried in the city cemetery. A plaque was erected at the site in their memory. Lori and Dina had restful sleeps after that day. They visit the pit on the anniversary of the collapse. All 25 spirits are there to greet them and thank them once again for bringing peace to their souls. I hope you enjoyed that. And to my YouTube family, thank you very much for continuing to support me. It is greatly appreciated. You all mean, as I always say, a great deal to me. And to anyone passing through, I hope you enjoyed the story this evening. I have other videos here you can check out. Maybe you find something else that interests you. If it does, please give it a like, drop a comment, share it with family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, anyone who you think may be interested. While you're here, also consider subscribing, and if you do, click that notification bell so that you'll know the next time that I upload. And as always, have a great rest of the evening, and ciao for now.